Frustration with the way the Indiana Fever run their offense has reached a new level, and this time it is not being dismissed as ordinary sports talk.
That Stephanie White's offense with Aaliyah Boston is a hindrance to Caitlin Clark.
Caitlin Clark attempted a career-high 24 shots Sunday at Chicago, and she scored 37 points to go with her 10 assists.
Caitlin Clark should be getting up 20 shots every single game. 20 shots every single game.
So Caitlin all of a sudden didn't have to worry about getting Aaliyah her shots. Pick and rolling with Aaliyah, making sure she got her touches.
And the worst part about picking and rolling with Aaliyah Boston is she don't set real picks like Michaela Timpson sets real picks, and she don't even finish on the pick and roll no more. The girl miss layups like Angel Reese now.
A pointed message has circulated toward head coach Stephanie White centered on a single complaint. The current system is getting in the way of what Caitlin Clark is capable of doing on the floor.
So there's no point, there's no benefit for Caitlin Clark with Aaliyah Boston anymore at this point. She's trying to play point guard. She's doing all types of stuff that she doesn't need to be doing.
But so are her field goal attempts this year, a career high 12.3, all of a sudden gone.
Watching the offense in recent weeks has resembled taking a high-performance car out of the dealership and then driving it slowly through a construction zone while towing a trailer. The design of the team's sets and the way possessions are being used have not matched the caliber of player running the point, and that mismatch has become harder to ignore with each passing game. Fans who follow the team closely have voiced the same frustration repeatedly this season, pointing to stretches where the offense bogs down in ways that seem avoidable given the talent on the roster. The criticism is not simply about wins and losses. It is about how the team's most capable offensive player is being deployed within the structure of each game plan. A system built around equal shot distribution makes sense for a roster without a standout scorer. It makes considerably less sense when one player is capable of generating offense at a rate no one else on the team or in the league can consistently match. The clearest illustration came against the Chicago Sky, when Clark scored 37 points and recorded 10 assists in a 113-90 win. She made a career-high 8 three-pointers as part of a franchise record 18 from beyond the arc for Indiana. What stood out about that outing was not only the scoring total, but the context around it. The offense that night was not weighed down by extended post touches, slow half-court sequences, or clunky handoffs on the perimeter. With that clutter removed, Clark operated with an efficiency that the rest of the league simply could not match. The broader pattern supports what that game suggested. When the floor is spaced and open, Clark plays at a level few others in the WNBA can reach. She is not simply a skilled passer who happens to score. She is a floor general with essentially unlimited range who has, for long stretches of this season, been used more like a conventional point guard whose main job is distributing the ball evenly to keep the offense balanced. That approach undercuts one of the most dynamic offensive talents the league has produced. Handing the primary decision-making role to a player of that caliber and then asking her to operate at a reduced pace so that the rest roster can keep up works against the team's own interests. The statistical gap in team performance between games where Clark is allowed to play aggressively and games where she is not tells much of the story on its own. It is a gap that shows up not just in her own scoring totals, but in how the rest of the roster performs around her when she is given room to operate. This is not a new observation among people who track the team closely. It has been raised in various forms throughout the season, usually following games in which the offense stalled during long stretches, only to look markedly different once Clark was given more freedom to create. Nobody disputes that Clark can pass. She is regarded as the premier playmaker in the league. The more relevant point is that her scoring threat is what creates the passing lanes in the first place. When she takes a passive approach and limits herself to around 15 shot attempts, defenses can afford to sit back. They can crowd her passing lanes, play her physically, and push the ball towards secondary options who do not draw the same defensive attention. When she is given the freedom to take 20 to 25 shots, opposing defenses are forced to react differently, and the structure they rely on tends to break down. Against Chicago, Clark's shot volume that night was among the highest of her career, and the result was not an inefficient ball-dominant performance. It was a demonstration of what happens when she is allowed to attack. She broke down defenders off the dribble, got to her pull-up before defenses could set, and capitalized on mistakes as they happened. That stands in contrast to stretches earlier this season, when she has been used primarily as a facilitator, standing on the perimeter while slower post-oriented sets developed. The difference between those two versions of the offense is not subtle. In one, Clark is the focal point of nearly every possession, forcing defenses to account for her before anything else develops. In the other, she becomes one of several options within a slower, more evenly distributed system, and the pace and spacing that make her effective are noticeably absent. That contrast raises a fair question about how the coaching staff has approached its offensive philosophy. It should not require a temporary change in the starting lineup to establish that the team's best player needs to be its highest volume shooter. At Iowa, Clark averaged close to 23 shot attempts a game in her senior season, a workload her college coaching staff clearly saw as central to the team's success, because a high-usage, aggressive version of Clark was understood to be the most dangerous version of her game. Moving to the professional level naturally comes with adjustments, but reducing her role to fit a more conventional, methodical offense works against the qualities that make her effective. When the pace slows to accommodate heavier post-up sequences, it interrupts the rhythm and tempo that Clark's game depends on, and it gives opposing defenses more time to set and adjust. A faster, more open system does not simply favor her individually, it also tends to produce better shots for the rest of the roster, since defenses are stretched thinner and have less time to recover between actions. Part of that friction traces back to how the front court has been used within the offense. Analysts who track the team closely have pointed to a recurring tension between high-usage post play and Clark's preference for pushing the pace. When possessions are spent establishing position in the low post, it limits the spacing Clark needs to attack off the dribble, and it slows the tempo the offense could otherwise be playing at. The team's pick-and-roll execution has compounded the issue. In a number of possessions, screens have lacked the contact and timing needed to create real separation for the ball handler. Instead of firm screens that free Clark immediately, softer or delayed screens have allowed perimeter defenders to recover and push her away from the middle of the floor. When a primary ball handler has to fight through physical defense without reliable screening, the offense loses much of its efficiency. Over the course of a full game, that inefficiency accumulates, turning what should be advantageous possessions into contested, low percentage looks late in the shot clock. There has also been a recurring pattern of post players initiating offense from the top of the key, effectively playing a point-forward role for extended stretches. That approach takes the ball out of Clark's hands at the point of initiation and slows the tempo considerably. Running an effective transition game becomes difficult when the primary ball handler is waiting on post players to clear the lane before a possession can develop. The difference was noticeable in games where those congested post touches were minimized. The lane opened up, pick-and-roll actions had room to develop, and Clark was able to operate with more freedom, creating the kind of pressure that forces opposing coaching staffs to adjust on the fly. Ball movement was quicker, transition opportunities were more frequent, and the team played with a different level of energy than it shows in slower, half-court heavy games. Those stretches offer a clear preview of what the offense can look like when its structure is built around pace and spacing, rather than around evenly distributing touches in the post. That leads to the broader question of shot distribution across the roster. Kelsey Mitchell has had an efficient season and has scored at a high level. Her contribution to the team is not in question. But when a team's secondary scoring option consistently attempts more shots per game than its most productive offensive player overall, that distribution reflects a structural issue rather than simply differing playing styles. Mitchell has averaged more shot attempts per game this season than Clark, which points to a system that does not fully reflect where the offense is most effective. Mitchell is a skilled scorer who thrives creating shots in isolation. Clark, by contrast, functions as the offensive engine for the team as a whole. Her presence alone changes how defenses allocate attention, which in turn creates better looks for teammates, including Mitchell. When Clark takes more shots, she draws more defensive focus, and that focus is what opens space for everyone else. That distinction matters when deciding how a shot distribution hierarchy should be built. A team can have more than one effective scorer without those scorers carrying equal offensive responsibility, and treating them as interchangeable in terms of usage overlooks the different roles each is suited to play. Reversing that dynamic, making Clark a lower usage option while running the offense through more conventional sets, plays directly into the hands of opposing defenses. Coaches facing the Fever are generally content to let other Indiana players get their shots up if it means limiting touches for the player capable of scoring from well beyond the three-point line and finding teammates through tight defensive coverage. Every possession spent working the offense through a secondary option instead of through Clark is, in effect, a possession that opposing defenses are willing to concede. The clearest path forward for the coaching staff is to build the offense around Clark on a consistent basis. That does not mean she needs to shoot on every possession, but it does mean she should remain the offense's primary decision-maker throughout the game. Placing her in an off-ball role for extended stretches, waiting to get open while the offense runs through more static sets, works against her greatest strengths. Adding to the difficulty of the situation is the physical toll Clark has absorbed since entering the league. From her rookie season onward, opposing teams have made a consistent effort to disrupt her physically. She has faced full court pressure, hard fouls, and persistent physical play designed to test her composure. That approach reflects a fairly common playbook against a young star. If a defense cannot contain a player through conventional means, disrupting her rhythm through physicality becomes the next option. Officiating has not consistently worked in her favor either. She regularly absorbs contact while driving to the basket without corresponding foul calls, while comparable contact on the other end of the floor is called more often. Opponents have recognized that limiting her comfort early in games can shift momentum, so physical disruptive defense has become a common strategy against her. What that approach has not accounted for is Clark's adjustment to the physicality. Over the course of the season, her strength and conditioning have visibly improved. She has shown an increased ability to drive through contact and finish at the rim, matching the physical style opponents have used against her. She has not just endured the added defensive attention aimed at her. She has adapted to it. But for her to continue overcoming that pressure, the coaching staff needs to give her the tactical freedom to respond to it. When a player is being targeted physically and defensively, limiting her to predictable, rigid sets makes her easier, not harder, to defend. A more varied, less predictable role gives her more ways to counter that pressure, rather than fewer. Comparisons to players like LeBron James and Luka Doncic are relevant here, not as exaggeration but as an accurate description of a similar developmental pattern. Like both of those players early in their careers, Clark has a basketball mind that allows her to read plays well ahead of most defenders. Her natural instinct is to make the fundamentally correct basketball play, to locate the open teammate, and to keep the offense moving. But as with young LeBron James in Cleveland or Luka Doncic in Dallas, there is a point at which excessive deference to teammates works against the team. When a player is clearly the most productive scoring option on the floor, the correct basketball decision is often to take the shot, rather than defer to a marginally more open teammate. That is the adjustment Clark appears to be making, and it is one that head coach Stephanie White should actively support, since a coaching staff plays a direct role in either encouraging or discouraging that shift in mindset. Elite players across basketball history have generally needed to learn when to shift from a pure playmaking mindset to a more assertive scoring approach. When Clark scores aggressively, it does not reduce her effectiveness as a passer. If anything, it increases the threat she poses in both areas. Defenses are then forced into a difficult decision: commit an additional defender to limit her scoring, or hold their base coverage and risk her finding open teammates through accurate passing. When she plays passively and limits herself to around 15 shots, defenses avoid that dilemma altogether. They can maintain standard coverage, apply physical pressure on the perimeter, and accept the results. This situation ultimately represents a significant decision point for the Indiana Fever organization. The opportunity to build a serious championship contender is in front of them, but it will require decisive choices rather than continued reliance on more conventional, post-oriented systems out of habit. Comfort with an established approach is not a strong enough reason to continue running an offense that limits its most productive player. Going forward, the offensive approach needs to prioritize spacing, decisive screening, and a reduced reliance on static post-up sequences that slow the pace of play. It also needs to give Clark consistent freedom to look for her own shot as soon as she crosses half-court. None of those adjustments require a wholesale reconstruction of the roster. They require a shift in how existing possessions are structured and who those possessions are built around. If the Fever want to move from being a high-profile, talked-about team to a consistently dominant one, the offensive restrictions currently in place need to be lifted. The evidence has been presented on the court repeatedly this season. What remains is whether the coaching staff is willing to adjust the system to match the caliber of player it has in Caitlin Clark. The Chicago game did not create a new argument so much as it confirmed one that had already been building for months. When the system gets out of her way, the results speak for themselves.